Hello everybody, thank you for finding us once again here at Autistic Radio. Reliably every Sunday we have a live broadcast which you can hear on Facebook or LinkedIn or YouTube. It's Harry's programme. Harry curates a Facebook page which misses out some of the noise of the internet and allows me, as somebody who doesn't use social media because it's so scary, to be able to see articles on autism and that are relevant to our community without having to negotiate everything else. So if there's one Facebook page to follow, I think it's the Autistic Radio.com, Harry's Facebook page. At this juncture, I always speak a little bit about what we're doing here at Autistic Radio and how it is Autistic Association, the entirely autistic charity that we set up ourselves, that supports the work that we're doing. One of the things that we do is we reach out when we're invited to conferences. We were represented at the UK Society for Behaviour Analysts in their annual conference in the spring, and we have just completed a presentation of the Autistic Radio model at the main PBS, Positive Behaviour Support Conference in Newcastle just last week. And what I presented there, with the help of my colleagues here at Autistic Radio, was the concept that the way they, as professionals, invite us to forums, invite us to focus groups to hear what we think and say, isn't necessarily the best format for us. And so I presented the Autistic Radio model, a way of having a safe space where we ourselves felt as though we were not overwhelmed by the neurotypical expectations, where we can do it from the comfort of our own home, off camera, and we are allowed to speak quietly, and we are allowed to pause while we're thinking, and there's no need to fill in all the gaps, amongst other features. I believe that some of the people there got it, because many people found me during that conference and they made a special effort to tell me things like I was brave taking part in conversations that other autistic people were unwilling perhaps to take part in, like ABA. And they also respected that there was a difference that we needed when we communicated. Overall, we got a lot of performance about how well we do at Autistic Radio. But those of you who have been advocating out there for a while will also realise that it's the behaviour that matters. And so just being told you're doing very well has to translate into behaviours and actions from the professional community. We will watch this space. Part of what we do has got the attention of one of the main charities, the charity called Scottish Autism. I can't say that Scottish Autism has welcomed the individual voice of the autistic community, if that's what we are. Our independence, as opposed to reliance on them, is a little bit frightening to them. However, we have received a grant from them, and the grant was received on the basis that we would have more studios out there and make it more accessible for people to join in on what we do here on Autistic Radio. So as an open meeting now, I want the guys to kind of come with me and discuss what we should spend this small amount of money, this £2,500 we have at the moment, to spend on equipment. What's the feelings of the priority of the group?
Well, I think there's an opportunity there to get more people involved. But the thing that I'm always kind of wary of is the stipulations of what the grant is and what they mean as other studios. Are they talking about equipment like we have just now? Like, for instance, I have my own studio in my living room because I've got the equipment to, and the computers, etc., to do what I'm doing just now. Is that what they're meaning, or are they meaning another place for people to go to?
Yeah, I when they asked me to do a little application form, and I put down that we would spend it on mobile or microphone studios that could be out there for people to use. And I'm aware that some of the members that take part, their equipment is going to be out of date soon because it's on Windows 10. So from my point of view, my suggestion would be that maybe we should get a good deal on some laptops and make sure that everybody is going to be able to join in and continue to join in before we add extra studios. Who out there is still dealing with Windows 10? I think Lucy is. I think GR has a problem with his machine at the moment. I don't know about Nicola. Maybe Nicola has a problem. And maybe even it would be a good idea for Raymond to have an alternative to the tower computer he's using. What do you guys think?
Jules, I'm on a laptop, sorry. Windows 10 expiring.
I have no idea.
Okay, how long have you had your laptop, Nicola?
My laptop is a refurbished second-hand thing that I bought off eBay, so I have no idea how old it is. It's a Chromebook, and what is any? I'll get that information to another time, rather than trying to figure it out live.
Harry, what do you think about this? I'm just listening to what we've got here, and I'm guessing that we've got at least 3 people, maybe 4 people out there whose computers are going to be out of date very quickly. And maybe we should be updating those and providing those people with this new equipment.
I'm totally happy with that, considering the people that we're talking about have been involved and they've been very committed in the last while, taking part, doing things. And you want to take care of that first before moving on into anything else. So I'm in total agreement. Because we know how fast computers and equipment can go out of date because of the way they're set up. So if there's a way of getting them updated and the money is available, why not use it?
Okay, so I'm glad we had this short conversation out in the open. It looks as though offline we'll have a discussion and see what we can do to make sure that everything that we're doing here at Autistic Radio is future-proof and move on. So let's get into the meat of today. Let's move along, and I'll take the microphone away from me now and pass over to Harry.
Thanks, Jules. Good evening, everyone. This is Harry's Facebook for Sunday, the 18th of May, 2025. A bit of a scorcher. And the theme to start with, the first post is from Pete Warmby, autistic author. And Pete Warmby, as stated, is an autistic and ADHD award-winning writer and speaker on autism and autistic lived experience. And he says the following: "It's so hot in the UK at the moment. It's sure to get hotter in the summer too. Heat is my biggest sensory sensitivity, so I have to carefully build my life around it as best I can. Cold showers, fans, aircon, ice cold drinks, and finding windy, breezy places are my best solution to it, as clothing is a tricky one for me due to other sensitivities. Learning about your own sensory profile isn't automatic. It takes time and effort and often needs support. But it's worth the work as it allows for greater autonomy and freedom. Freedom from awful, debilitating discomfort. Settle down when you can and try to identify those sensory triggers and glimmers, it's not all negative, so you can regain control of your environment. And the world when it decided that clothes would have scratchy little tags that if you cut them off would be even sharper and scratchier is one example of the sensitivity." What's people's thoughts on that post?
Yeah, I'm a bit dodgy with heat. See, I like to wear dark colours and black, and I don't really like disrobing because of, recently I've had bother with insects biting me, which may be psychological, but I don't think so. It's an actual reality. Today I had to take an antihistamine because I've got a strange itch in my arm and there's nothing there. So whatever that is. But I've always found heat a problem, and we aren't even there yet. I mean, this is only May. This is only 19, 20 degrees in Scotland. I remember when it hit nearly 30, and that was like, oh, that's when you have to take care in this country, especially animals. So, yeah. But I think there's a kind of an emotional mood thing as well with summer for me. I get actually depressed in summer. It's because of the intensity of life. There's so much going on. People are kind of happy. The onus is on you to be happy and to participate. And if you're not up for that, then it can be not a very nice time. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I get that. Your last point. But today, for instance, I was very tired. Me being me, it's just the way my life is, haven't been sleeping properly. And I was actually feeling quite strained. So strained that even my face was feeling strained. So I thought I need to kind of sleep properly. So I was sleeping most of the day today. But I was feeling bad for doing so because you can see that it's a beautiful day. I could be out. Where I live is close to Loch Lomond, a global place where a lot of people travel to, obviously from all over the world to see. And a day like this is brilliant. You don't get this weather on a regular basis. So there's this sort of guilt feeling that why you're not making the opportunity of going out and enjoying not the sunny weather, because I'm not a big fan of the sun anyway, because I'm fair skinned, red hair when I had it, so I burn easy. But it's like everybody else seems to be doing it, and everybody else is out having a good time because it's a Sunday. Most people aren't working, they're taking the opportunity themselves to capture the moment out in their gardens, going to different places, just being out or going to the pub, sitting in a beer garden, stuff like that. It's just like, why am I not doing it? I am wasting the day by sitting in my house, nice and secure, curtains closed, and even though I'm comfortable, it feels daft because it doesn't seem normal. Even though I'm at a stage in my life where normal's a lot of nonsense and all that, but even though that is the case, it sometimes just comes and grasps you a little bit, sometimes off guard, because of the way the society around you is. Like there's a normal that you need to aspire to, and if you don't aspire to it or go by the so-called rules, you feel that you're doing something wrong.
Have you noticed how a lot of countries have air conditioning and we don't?
I'm a big fan of the heat. Like I have to wear like a hat from September to April, and I really don't like breezes and stuff on me. So the temperature wise, it makes me really like happy in the summer. And as long as I wear dark glasses, I can cope with the glare of the sun. I struggled more with that when I was younger and just like, yeah, like got a lot of headaches and things. I don't know why I didn't have sunglasses or a hat back then. But yeah, a lot of people do struggle with the heat. It's funny how we're all different, and I got to do a sensory profile with an occupational therapist and found it's really, really helpful. And I experienced that as well of sometimes being really seriously affected by sensory stuff, but having difficulty figuring out what was wrong. So sort of not registering it very well. So I've had to work on like noticing, and then just like using, like, you know, being sort of careful, and using things to help me and stuff.
So no breezy sound gardens for you, Nicola, if you're sensitive to the wind, unfortunately.
Yeah, as long as I didn't have to try and hold a conversation, I suppose. Like I could probably enjoy it, but like I can appreciate the wind and stuff, and I can appreciate getting up high on a mountain and really like feeling that. But like I can find trying to do other stuff while that's happening, just a bit kind of kryptonite. Like remember Leith Walk, I feel is a bit of a nemesis with that wind and dust and noise.
And that sunshine.
It's interesting to me how people have taken two aspects to this. The actual physical experience of the heat being too much, but also how the rest of society changes around us and how we feel excluded. The way everybody else goes around things, the way there's a bonding and you see groups of people, friendship groups, family groups. It's something that actually makes us feel more isolated the summer, because it's more visual how different our own lives is by comparison.
I don't really pay any attention to what other people are doing. You know, unless they're people that are telling me about what they're doing, and in that moment I'll care for like to hear, but I just really don't care what the other folks are doing. And it's really like life's a lot better not caring.
Yeah, putting the
I
notes there.
find when just going to say, I find that when it reaches a certain temperature, I'll be really ill for 2 or 3 days when it's warm. And after that, it's like I've acclimatized to it. I did work outdoors for 12 years, but the worst thing for me is blankets on beds. And I've just taken a blanket off my bed, and I'm probably will struggle to sleep with less blankets on my bed even though obviously with more blankets on my bed, I wake up and I'm hot and I'm throwing them off anyway.
So do you prefer blankets to duvets?
I have just trying to think. I have a linen sheet, and then I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 blankets and a duvet on top of that, and I've just taken one blanket away.
Yeah, I can remember the succession of blankets. Like there was an undersheet, there was a cover sheet, there was all this stuff, and then the candle wick blankets. I remember picking holes in them as a kid. Anyway, that's a distraction. But even when the duvets arrived in our house, because we modernized, there was still this the oversheet and undersheet business that my mum did and all that, which I kind of broke the habit of eventually, and it's just undersheet and duvet. But it's like Tog say, it's the way to the duvet as well. There's one for summer, there's one for winter. There's like not having a duvet at all some nights.
In the winter I have socks, tracksuit bottoms, and I wear a t-shirt to bed as well. But it's not having that weight on me that I've thought about looking into weighted blankets, but I haven't got round to it.
Yeah, I thought we were going to get to that. An awful lot of autistic people talk about needing some sort of weight pressure on them to make them feel grounded and secure, and also being tucked in. I remember being tucked in when I was a kid, when, like Raymond was talking about, the old-fashioned blankets around you and a candlewick over the top of it, and your mum and dad would come and tuck you in, and that would give you that feeling of security. And if you had moved around in the bed, you needed them to come back and tuck you in again to make you feel that weight and security of it. Maybe that's part of it, Gia.
Yeah, I mean, also when I go away, I don't sleep because it's a strange bed. I just can't get comfortable. Usually, I mean, the longest I've been away is a week, and by the time I'm on my way back, I've got used to the strange bed in the hotel.
That's a big thing for me as well. Strange beds. It's like I get strange dreams in them.
I think that there can be like challenges adjusting to the change in temperature and stuff, just because we have to like think again about what you're meant to wear outside. You can't just be like in your usual routine of grab this and get out the door. You've got to recalibrate. And I think with the sheets thing as well, it's like having to compromise on weight for temperature and things. I love my weighted blanket, and I find it quite good in the summer too because it's quite cool. And it was just reminding me of when the kids were wee, or if they were watching a cartoon, they would always be like, "Come and sit on me, squash my legs, sit on my legs, please sit on my legs." They were just always wanting to be squashed. And I'd be like, "You're really small," and then they would be so happy if you kind of managed to squash them just a little bit. It was quite disturbing.
What you're saying about air conditioning, I find that it means that you're basically going from the heat into a fridge. When I go to the cinema in town in the summer, I take a jacket with me to put on because it is just like a fridge in there.
Yeah, I was thinking air conditioning because it's like I've got a lot of foreign neighbours and they speak about it, but it's also this thing about dust as well where we live. Apparently, air conditioning helps with purifying your air in a sense, or working with dust.
Well, I just use a fan anyway. Generally in the bedroom, although when it gets kind of warm like this, in the living room as well, which is sometimes quite strange because if I'm watching the telly and the fan's right next to me, it's quite hard to hear. The one thing about sensitivity, the one thing that I do all year round, is I keep, unless it's extreme cold weather, I keep my bedroom cool. It's hardly ever het up by central heating. I keep it off because I wouldn't be able to sleep otherwise. I wouldn't be able to be comfortable otherwise. I need that cool room, and that's what the fan generally is. And it's good that I do that. And sometimes, it's like if I'm sitting in the living room right now, and of course I don't have the fan on because I want to feel the sound. But I'm looking forward to later on getting into the bedroom and just turning the fan on and that cool air coming out. And it's something to look forward to sometimes. It's these wee rituals that you have that make things comfortable. But what I also must say about the heat and the weather, maybe not the heat, but more the weather, is it's not all negative. It depends what day it is, of course. It's like the light, the brightness, the colourfulness actually is a great thing. Like when I used to go to Oxfam, to work there for the day once a week, and if it was nice and bright, it would actually give me a little kick. To get up, and I looked forward to it more because I was going out in the sunshine, even though I was going into a back room with they've got windows, but windows you couldn't look out of, basically. So it does seem a bit daft, but see, actually travelling there and getting out, standing at the bus stop, travelling there and getting out at lunchtime and leaving in the evening if the weather's still good, it gets the spirits up, and it really does give you that kick, especially in the morning. So the weather isn't all bad, but unfortunately the sensitivity to heat does get you. But there's ways around it. It's just to kind of show that it's not just all bad, as I said before.
The weather isn't bad, it's just how people use it.
Yeah, I think the poster is really talking about the autonomy you get when you take control yourself and learn about your sensory profile. They say it takes time and effort, and sometimes it needs support from somebody else. But when you are not just stuck in a place that's too hot, when you've got the tools and the ways of thinking about it that can get around it, it increases your autonomy, increases the size of the place that you live in, where you are. So the poster is making a good point to put some thought into it yourself and realise your own sensitivities. As everyone here has said, they have these things. One practical thing is don't cut the labels out of your clothing because they're itchy. Go to a cheap shop, a pound shop or something, and get a stitch ripper so that you actually cut the stitches out and remove the threads as well, because otherwise you'll end up with a nasty place that's even worse. So it's a stitch ripper, not just cutting the label.
Or like me, you end up with a big hole where the label used to be. I need to ask, is it a myth that on really hot days, if you're up early enough and it's cool enough, you close your windows to stop the heat getting into the house?
I've heard that. Also, draw blinds. If you've got blinds or curtains, keep them drawn because don't let the sunlight into the house.
You have to do that as a book collector and former seller because it would just bleach the spines of books within weeks.
Oh yeah, the sun can do damage to certain things, especially books, etc., and other things that are exposed to the sunlight, because we know how strong the sun is, despite its distance.
I live in a stone building, a very old building, so the heat is controllable by the thermal mass. But what you've just said there, in hot weather, we tend to have windows open in the night so that the cool night air gets through and refreshes the whole thing, and then close them as it starts to be morning, and then close down the curtains to reflect the sunlight so you don't get the solar gain.
Good, thanks for confirming that, because, you know, I've been around a long time, and through this life I've lived certain things that have been myths, you know. They've worked, but they've been entirely like mistaken.
The next post was shared from yourself, Raymond. The next post is from Martin Newell, and it's described as Duke of Tunes, a self-employed entrepreneur. And what Martin's shared is something from the East Anglian Daily Times. And I'll just read it out. It's called "I Think He's a Bit Special." Can you still call it Asperger's? We asked. Can you still call it Asperger's? We were asked recently. The official answer is no. Medical professionals now call it ASD, or Autism Spectrum Disorder. New research claims that up to 20% of us may be affected. Jolly good. I'm becoming bored with hearing about neurodiversity. Let's get to the point. About 10 years ago, I was having my usual rage while struggling with some simple bit of machinery or other when a nearby observer remarked, "It's because you're dyspraxic." Dyspraxia, once known as clumsy child syndrome, was the problem, she said. As an experienced teacher of people with learning difficulties, she just assumed that I must have known about it. It was the first that I've heard of it. I'd always just accepted, for instance, that I can't drive a car or play a drum kit. I'm not even very good at telling left from right either. As a musician, I have trouble with those instruments requiring me to perform certain functions. For example, playing an accordion is impossible for me because, like drums, it involves my doing at least 3 times simultaneously at different speeds. Dyspraxia, the teacher told me, is not uncommon amongst people with Asperger's syndrome. Well, at least I haven't got that, I quipped. She nodded patiently and didn't reply. After she'd gone, I read up on the subject. I later spent ages secretly doing a long Asperger's test online. The results seemed to imply that I might be a borderline case. About a week later, I told my friend that I'd taken a test. She asked me which particular test I'd done. I described it, adding that it involved tons of tedious questions. She replied, "Okay, I do know that test. Now, would you mind doing it again, but this time under my supervision?" I reacted with suspicion. The second test proved me to be rather further over the line than the first had done. This ruffled my feathers. So, if I'm Asperger's, how come I've managed so far by myself? She informed me that I'd self-compensated, because often that's what people like me do. The matter remained a bone of contention. We were discussing in the pubs 2 nights later, when a rather forthright bloke at our table interrupted. "I can tell you whether you were on the spectrum or not, mate. I'm going to ask you one question. When you was wrong, was people always shouting at you and yet you never knew why?" I answered that yes, that had been exactly the case in every school which I attended, as well as at home. Well, there you are then, he said. The same as me. I'm one too, and I can usually spot them. You see, readers, if you grew up in the 60s or 70s and were a bit special, that's what happened. They didn't call it neurodiversity back then. They just shouted at you, clipped you round the head, told you to pay attention, or sometimes inquired as to whether or not you were deaf or just stupid. Nor were you picked for football teams, unless they were desperate. Authority figures frequently ordered you to look me in the eye. You had no idea why. Sometimes it was hard to read people's faces. You couldn't tell when people were lying or why they were angry. Your silence was sometimes taken as dumb insolence. Instead, you concentrated upon what you excelled at. In my case, reading, writing, and entertaining people. If bullied, you might occasionally react with such inappropriate savagery that they drag you off your shock tormentor saying, "That's something not right about you, boy." Mostly, though, you just wept, stayed out their way, and buried yourself in books. You tried to copy what everyone else did. I suppose that would be self-compensation, but... Like Gary Newman and Chris Packham, however, both of whom discovered in adulthood that they had Asperger's, I now wouldn't have had it any other way. Composing music, writing and performing have been the making of me. I'm capable of unusual feats of concentration in all my chosen occupations. If having a rocky time of it in my youth was the price I paid, I still consider it a bargain. I know, of course, there are different degrees of severity in certain afflictions, but in my own case, I have a condition rather than a disability. So, if 20% of us are neurodiverse, or whatever experts are calling it this week, it's really not that serious. It doesn't preclude us working, living, or loving. I think it would be far worse to be blighted by idleness. I'm glad that some genius has made it. I'm glad that some genius had made this glaringly obvious new discovery. So it turns out that we're not all exactly the same. I've often suspected it. After all, it would be a terrible thing if being normal became the new normal. Can we get on now, please? That was a bit of a mouthful, but worth reading. What's people's thoughts?
Wow. What strikes me about this is all the information's there, all the narrative there, but some people are just going to skip straight past this and get angry about the language. And the attitude, you know, the stick up, mustn't grumble, that kind of attitude is refreshing. And the way he's saying that, look, I'm me, I'm happy to be me, I recognise this stuff, is refreshing and interesting, and people should be able to express themselves in any way they like. As far as the autistic community goes, he's breaking the rules on the political correctness of how the neurodiversity movement explains themselves, and that's okay. That's perfectly okay. Why does he have to learn a whole new set of ways of expressing himself just to fit in with the in crowd in autism? And I would say he doesn't. it's very interesting to me to hear somebody rock starring it, but being clear, undermining some things that people have worked a long time to try and get out there. But if somebody cares about communication and they spend time looking at it and reading it again, he's not transgressing. You know, he's explaining what a lot of us experience. So for all the people who care about whether it's neurodivergent or neurodiversity, Asperger's, or whether they don't like the word condition, or just relax a bit and see the truth in what he's saying as well.
It was interesting reading that, because when I share these things, I look at maybe the first couple of sentences before. This is worthwhile sharing. I'd never read it through it all. I don't research it too much because I want it, especially when it's a post that's close to when we have this programme. It's something I look forward to discussing and what is taken from it. And the thing that was making me uncomfortable, you know, when I knew towards kind of reading it, was talking about Asperger's, and it was kind of mentioned a few times in the piece. But reading it out there, it felt like I was going through a journey, and I wasn't really sure how it was going to end up. But it was a worthwhile one. And what it did illustrate is it's one person's view, one person's journey that you're sharing. And I think that's always worthwhile sharing and talking about when it comes to, you know, discussion, when it comes to just sharing somebody else, because it shows you about the stereotype, that it knocks down stereotypes. And even when you read something for the first time, sometimes it takes maybe a second read or even third or even more than that, and it might sound a bit different each time, because especially my brain, the way my brain works is I need to read instructions over and over till they make sort of sense. Sometimes reading even something like that, like somebody sharing a journey, an opinion, a view, it always seems to come through in different ways, and that's what makes these sort of pieces interesting.
It was nice to see that there was a comment there from the autistic community that doesn't just shoot him down in flames. And I'll read it. If you still want to call it Asperger's, it's up to you. I will never use that term. A friend of mine said that about me. And when I told him the historical context of not using that term, he was genuinely shocked, and he said that he would never use it again. Now that person has really thought about what they want to say. They don't like the term Asperger's being used, but they, right at the beginning, say, you know, you use the language that you want to use, and then explain why they don't use it for reasons, without attacking, without purposefully picking to hurt somebody or police what they say.
That was me.
I think I figured out from reading into the comments on the guy's Facebook page that this was maybe about 10 to 12 years ago that this all happened, and maybe he was just using the term Asperger's in that contemporary sense. So that's what it was called then, although it doesn't quite make that explicit. Yeah. this is very resonant to people of a certain age group, you know, who share the age group with the poster. There was one or two wee things in that I was nitpicking about, but, you know, I can accept them, you know. At times there's nothing wrong with idleness, but that's just a personality issue, you know. Some people are just into being active and doing stuff. And having checked the guy out, he is very active and he's very creative. So, yeah. I think that might be a brief explanation as to the use of the term Asperger's. Sorry.
Yeah, like I say, that was me. A friend of mine said he knew someone with Asperger's, and I said to him about the history of Asperger, and he was genuinely shocked, and he said that he would never use the term again. I mean, if people want to identify as Asperger, that's up to them, but I am really, really uncomfortable with using that as a term. So that's why I posted that.
I remember you mentioning once, JR, that you liked it. Well, you didn't like it necessarily, but you prefer the term neurodiverse, maybe even on a sonic level. You know, it sounds good. And it made me think about that word because I'd been struggling with, like, what do you say? Is it neurodivergent? Is it neurodiverse? And getting it wrong all the time. And I kind of like the way neurodiverse lands as opposed to neurodivergent, which I think you maybe explained at one point.
I don't like the word autistic because it strikes me as a sharp and stabby word, whereas I like the word autism because it's a smooth, silky word, and neurodiverse is a smoother word than neurodivergent. I don't know why. That's just the way I think.
I find it interesting that the autistic community wish to standardize the language as a political statement, and I think there's benefits in that when they're actually dealing from the background of them being a minority. But language is also personal, and language is an expression of a person. The way somebody's accent or the words they choose should be allowed as their palette, how they want to paint the world. Now, if we take the word neurodiverse, people would say that the concept of neurodiversity is that the humanity is neurodiverse. Everybody is a different part of a version of humanity, that it's all different and we're all neurodiverse because the actual difference between us is neurodiversity, but that we can then take a group and we can say they are neurodivergent from the average, from the main. Well, that doesn't make logical sense either, because if we're all neurodiverse, there is no main, you know. So in some ways, why not use the word neurodiverse if it feels better, if it sounds better? If that's the way that it communicates to somebody that you are part of the autism world, fine. But people will shout you down for it.
It's all about language, you're right. Even to this day, I hear people, probably not autistic, although I'm not always sure, but it may be the case they're not. When they describe someone else who is autistic, has got Asperger's, My parents, when they're talking about me, say they've got Asperger's, but I think that's only because that was the medical term I was given when I was diagnosed all those years ago. And that's what they know as that identity to me. Personally, I'm not that comfortable with it. Not just because of the historic kind of background to Asperger himself, who the condition's named after, but just because it was Asperger's syndrome. It's just the wording, it's just the way it's described as like there's something wrong. You know, that word syndrome itself is quite brutal itself, even though at the time it was a step forward. So I don't want to kind of be too critical of it, but I do. It's still something. It's still something that many people do use when identifying someone else. But as we say, words and language a lot of the time, even when the word is changed slightly, like the word autistic and the word autism is very similar, but when you change it slightly, it's a lot more comfortable to some people than the other, and it's either got an opposite effect. Some people prefer autistic and other people prefer autism. It just depends who you're talking to, who identifies with it, and who they're describing. It just depends, and that's the power of language, and I like that in many ways, although it becomes complicated in many ways. But I do like that a lot of this language thing is very personal and very individual, and it just shows you how individual people are in general, and not just thrown, even though people are thrown into boxes and stereotypes, etc., for the sake of society running in some people's eyes. It just shows individualities out there within everyone. The next post is from Life of an Autistic Mum, which is a non-governmental organisation, and described as "Welcome to our secret world of autism. Here we educate, motivate each other, and spread autism awareness. And we also share our family lifestyle. Welcome, enjoy our little world of peace, love, and light." And what they've shared is the following quote: "Autistic people deserve compassion, not pity. They require love, understanding, acceptance, and support. In due time, they'll excel as lawyers, doctors, and teachers." What's people's thoughts on that particular quote? The reason that I shared it, while it's very positive sounding, I find that it might put pressure on people because of what it said at the end.
Yeah, it sounds really nice, but it's like in the UK, the stats say that about 22% of autistic adults are in employment, according to the data from the Office of National Statistics. Like sometimes there's this like, oh, autism's not a disability, and I'm like, what's going on? Because I find being autistic pretty like difficult, and there's societal like issues like in dealing with other people, but there's like sensory issues as well. Like it's not just this easy thing to live with, and you're just going to be a doctor. Oh my gosh. Like, I don't think you'd want me to be your doctor, like, quite honestly. Like, I feel like you'd want a doctor who was a lot steadier in a lot of ways, and able to, like, think a lot faster. So I don't know, it just doesn't seem very realistic to me. But like, I know that autism's a very like broad spectrum.
You might be a different type of doctor, but not even a doctor, like a health person, you know? I mean, all these state kind of roles, you know, are formed by, you know, the conditions. But there are variations on these things. These needs are there, but they can I mean, just imagine there wasn't an organised state. There'd still be people dealing with health. And I think you have experience, don't you, of looking at alternative therapies. The law, I suppose, is maybe be a different matter. That could get quite deep here. But I agree with you on this thing of the condition. There's that word again, because I've been thinking about condition. It's like, you know, if you have, say, an allergic reaction to things, you know, there's nothing wrong going on. It's the body's just responding to the situation. And so if your condition makes you unable to a certain extent to tolerate or work with the prevailing conditions of employment, say, of what is expected of a so-called normal life, there's nothing wrong there. That's just what's going on. And you have to work a kind of compensation. So I'll let it go there.
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like I would probably be able to like help somebody accept their death, but like, I don't think like mainstream medicine would be like a viable career path for me, really. But yeah, like, I just don't think, I think I've just like got too old to be able to be like idealistic about like how we can just make the world great by thinking about it better, you know. And there's an awful lot of stuff that's way beyond like somebody who's just getting on in their daily life's ability to sort of change. And I think there just can be like a crippling amount of pressure when really like just trying to live like as well as you can day to day is like quite a good goal. But that could be a particular perspective that hopefully not a lot of people have to adopt.
I think a lot of people are responsive to little victories in life, you know, and are aware that there's a huge experience, life out there that is sometimes beyond us. And, you know, what you were saying there about helping accept death is one of the most fundamental aspects of that, because this is a society that fears that and has built a whole society on fearing that reality. So without getting too deep on that one, there are things that make it less easy to be idealistic, as you stated, about achievement, say, and ambition and desire and these things that are expressed in this post, I think, just to bring it back to the post, because I think that's what we're maybe trying to work around here.
The post is from a US perspective. And I think from my position, from what I see, it's trying to counter all the negative kind of spin that's going on autism at this particular moment, politically and socially, over in the United States of America. So I'm getting that. But it seems it's went from one extreme to another. And some people reading that, it may kind of take them aback. I mean, just think of my own life itself. I was never going to be a doctor or a lawyer or anything like that. I mean, in fact, you know, Nicola mentioned that, you know, in the UK, you know, 20% or there's a large percentage of autistic people who are unemployed, and I'm one of them. And I found it hard to get employment. In fact, I found it hard to even think of going into employment because the environment that I'm fearing to go into. So in the main, now I'm 44 now. and I've never had an actual full-time job in terms of employment. And that sounds bad, but what I have done is I have worked voluntarily. I've worked in an internship for a year, and I've also done a lot of voluntary stuff, it's quite kind of intense work, like financial and admin, which is quite intense. And I know what the post is trying to do. It's trying to say, don't belittle people. Look what autistic people can do. And I get that, but it just seems it seems that that's quite a kind of strong and quite intense thing for many autistic people will read from that. And if they feel that they have not went to that stage, like even getting a job, they're thinking they're failures in life, but they're not. It's just the way society doesn't fit with autistic people, either if it's in the US or the UK or anywhere else in the world.
I think, Harry, it's a very good idea that you pointed out the context of where this person's speaking from. If you look at the web page that goes with the post, you will be confronted with a very different community, an American community, a community mostly based around people of colour, people from different ethnic backgrounds that are not white. So it may be that within that community, this person is speaking in an appropriate way for them because they are fighting to advocate for their child and also reach out to people like themselves that may be told that autism is a curse on them. So, yes, the meme is a bit black and white. It is a bit, we can become lawyers and doctors and teachers. Well, I'm a frighteningly intelligent person and I'm not a lawyer, a doctor or a teacher, and I'm never going to become one. And part of that is my autism. There are so many other things you can be in life than these highly valued positions.
Are these highly valued positions normalizing? It's just an impression I get. I mean, I'd take on board the explanation you've given about the intersectional basis of the poster.
Yeah, like this. We were talking about the Asperger's word, and it's linked to Nazi doctor, and how it was this idea that these children are possibly gifted special children, and they can be saved, and it's this kind of, I don't know, I hear what you're saying, Jules, but I also just I feel like it smacks of that same bad attitude about autism and ability and the kind of work that's valued in our society. But then there's another side of it as well, is perhaps with supports, with a lot of with accommodations, we can achieve quite different things, but then that's really going to change society if then there's going to have to be whole swathes of people whose jobs it is to meet the needs of certain people so that then they can do X, Y, or Z. So I don't know. We're going deep.
This person's working in a society which is constantly pathologizing their children, their kids. So they're doing what an awful lot of autistic people themselves do in their advocacy. They say, fuck you, They say, we can be this. It's an exaggeration, it's a push out in one direction. I mean, if you look at their website, it's got puzzle pieces all over it. It's got pathologizing language all over it. But on the other hand, it's not Autism Speaks. It's not ABA, old-fashioned ABA with kids receiving electric shocks from backpacks like the Rothenberg Centre. It's almost as, it's almost allowable on the basis that they are doing some good to increase people's self-esteem, with all the caveats that everybody else says. I don't think I disagree with anybody else's words here. And yes, somebody's put something very important in the text. They say, I worry about neurotypical, normative expectations amongst the autistic community. I worry about that too. And that this organisation has that plastered all over it. But the alternative is no hope pathology, and they're behind the curve, but they're moving away from our children are fucked. We just have to treat them like children for the rest of their lives, and they will never progress beyond.
Sorry, Jules, is that the alternative to neurotypical normative expectations?
I don't know. I just want to be forgiving about people that are perhaps misguided but trying their best, that are making an incredible effort to try to say to the society around them that there is potential in their kids. And if they do that with an exaggeration of normal expectations, I'm willing to forgive them for it because they have expectations for their kids.
Yeah, for sure. My concern is just that we're all conditioned in this way. I'm there too. I'm conditioned to have neurotypical normative expectations. That's the society we live in. It's very difficult to even experience the alternatives, which are to not have neurotypical normative expectations. It's not hopeless, I think. It's very creative. But society doesn't afford spaces for that. And I see that as, if anything, the kind of work that I can do in this community.
I so agree with you, Raymond. I so agree with you. When I say, it kind of hurts me to say it, when I say they have expectations for their kids, it's like, yeah, they might not be on the road towards getting their children to accept exactly who they are necessarily, and they may have these ideas that they should be normalized, but they haven't given up. And I'm just willing to forgive them for not having given up. And you are one of the people that can move to that next stage, but other people maybe have to go through other stages before they get there.
I believe if this was shared from someone in the UK, the language was changed. It wouldn't be lawyers and doctors and teachers. It would be more about, they could be musicians, they could be artists, they could be writers, which seems more realistic and maybe less pressured than the wording that was put across, but it still has the same sentiment. So I totally understand what's being said, what's been shared as well, and whereabouts in the journey this person is, and where they live, of course, and the cultures that they live within. and of course how we all feel about it. It just shows you how fast it is and how different it can be within countries like the US and the UK, which can differ on quite a lot of things.
It's very middle class, though, isn't it? It's like keeping up with the Joneses. It's almost like this thing that was brought up when we were discussing Jules's travels in India and the expectations amongst populations in India and other countries of their autistic children. You know, I hate saying it, but seeking a cure, you know, in order to normalize their child's experience, in order to make it in life, you know, as we've all kind of felt the struggle in trying to achieve.
I've just put in the text that an extract from their website, and it says that their main purpose is to enable and empower parents and caregivers of children and young people with special needs, particularly those children and young people who are not in education, training or employment, so that they can learn skills and trades. So it's softened in some parts of their idea. The meme itself that we have just all read and reacted to is an extreme example to get attention, because that's what you have to do in social media, get attention. So the other point here is, if the autistic community, particularly people like ourselves who are late identified and have come to this newly in some ways, if we appear to be denigrating the experience of mothers of autistic children, we will do ourselves a disservice, because there's a real prickliness, there's a real who's in the right camp thing going out there in all kinds of ways in autism, and we would want to support parents, and we would want parents to feel as though they could converse with us, speak with us, listen to us, and not come across enormous amounts of criticism, but us be part of their support. And that's the only way that, as these children develop and go on and build their own self-esteem and their own sense of identity, it's the only way that they will have access to further ideas away from what they've been brought up with, is if we are not a scary against version of autism.
Well, we're displaying that classic autistic thing, especially for myself as a late diagnosed autistic person, elderly, you know, that I've totally forgotten what I was going to say. Yeah, we seek clarification. That's why we'll sometimes not accept words as given.
The next post is from Neurodivergent Lou, who's a blogger finding a place in the neurotypical world. And as always, Lou has shared a presentation. And this presentation is called Autistic and Genuine Clarifying Questions Being Interpreted as Rude, and Other Snapshots, and other social snapshots in autistic life. Struggling with phone calls. Asking lots of genuine clarifying questions which are interpreted as being rude. Feel like everyone has a secret social rulebook of how to communicate, which we don't have. Hiding away in the bathroom to recharge midway through socialising. pre-planning a conversation script, but the other person doesn't follow their part of the script. Being manipulated in social situations and friendships. Manually learning and analysing social cues. Feeling like you don't know who you are anymore as you're masked so hard. Saying it's fine, but delayed processing means the emotion doesn't hit until days later. Being one step away from massive meltdown mid-conversation. Mimicking the personality of those around you without realising. Genuinely answering "how are you" when they just wanted to hear "good thanks." Terrified of being misunderstood due to constantly being misunderstood as an autistic person. Sharing a relatable story to show you care. Giving an authentic explanation which is seen as an excuse, but giving all the detail needed or being blunt and concise with no in between. Feeling lonely, but not able to socialise. Struggling to focus on a conversation due to processing amplified sensory information in the environment. Grabbing any opportunity to segue into a special interest. Constantly checking that we have said the right thing. Tone of voice, facial expression doesn't match what we are saying. Eye contact feels painful. Saying what even though you have heard exactly what is said, but you need more time to process. Repeating the same question over and over again in order to repeating the same question over and over again in order to seek reassurance. May not realise when someone is making a hint. For example, hinting that they are ready to go home by saying it was really nice to see you, or beginning to put coat on, etc. Zoning out during conversation. May not ask questions of others in a conversation, but instead expect them to just respond and talk about themselves. There's a lot of information there, but I can identify with much has been said. What do people think about this particular presentation?
I think if you're seeking kind of that knowledge, this is very helpful, you know. Currently, I'm finding this kind of thing overwhelming because, you know, there's a lot of it around, and, you know, there comes a period when you've heard a lot of it. Not necessarily before, because some of this is quite, you know, stimulating to me, you know, the one feeling like you don't know who you are anymore as you've masked so hard. You know, have it put that way, it's kind of, it depends if you're in a resonating kind of mood, you know, and recently I resonate with that because the other day I was asking myself, like, what do I want anymore, you know? Because, you know, I was always chasing something, grabbing onto things and collecting things and holding on to things and going, yo, mission achieved, you know? But recently there's just nothing. And it doesn't concern me or worry me. It was just a kind of empty feeling. And I thought, well, what now? You know? And I suppose I'm in the waiting stage, you know, which is kind of groovy and very positive.
Reading through that, there's one thing that sticks in my head because it was quite recent, and it's happened to me quite a few times, is that I'm out somewhere. This particular time it was a pub. I was out and I was speaking with a friend of mine who's autistic, so that sort of helps, settle you down, etc. Even though it was a Friday and it was quite busy, etc. And he went home, and I thought, well, I'll stay a wee bit longer before I get the train home myself. And where I was sitting, it was like 2 bars together, but one bar was closing. So I had to go. Well, I didn't have to go. If I wanted to stay, I would go into the next bar. And because I was sitting myself, and that was quite nice and spacious, which is probably why the bar was closing. But I went to the other bar, and it was a karaoke, and it's not my scene, it's not my thing, but it was okay. But I got a phone call from my dad, and because it was quite loud, I was trying to speak to him because he was asking me to do something the next day. And the conversation was fine, but all that sort of energy and concentration of the phone call and understanding what he was asking and me agreeing to it. So I was kind of sat down and was kind of drinking my beer, kind of trying to recover from that bit of energy. And where I was sitting just happened to be next to some people, and the guy next to me was just wanting a conversation just off the bat, and he was talking away, and he was a bit drunk. I mean, so was I, in fairness. And he kept asking about 100 questions, and I sort of said to him quite abruptly, "Sorry, I can't speak to you just now." And it was quite abrupt, the guy, and I felt it was cheeky, and I didn't like doing it, but I felt I had to do it that time. But I felt terrible for it. And I'm thinking, I'll need to make up for this, because I was out of order there. So I used an excuse to ask where the toilet was, and he says, "Oh, you speak to me now?" And I kind of said, "Sorry, I was just busy with something." And then I seemed to sort of recover, and then everything was all right again. Then he just started blaring about whatever it was, and it turned out all right. And basically my point is all that work getting into a conversation with someone, especially strangers, and how much energy and how much thought, and this is a couple of weeks now, and even I'm still thinking about it, even though that all turned out well, but I still felt bad for cutting the guy off. And it's that sort of thing, that kind of haunts me at times, even though that it was recovered. The guy will probably not even remember the conversation, but me being me, will probably remember it for the next 20 years. So that's what the presentation in many ways reminds me of in certain kind of instances.
See that haunting thing, Harry, where something lives with you like that? I get that too, and I think it's quite spiritual. And I'm not talking about, drinks. It's kind of like if you were... I sometimes say to myself, if I was an artist, I would have done a work on that. I would have used that kind of haunting feeling, that thing in me, to create something like a work, to get it out, exercise it almost. It doesn't mean it goes away. It just means that you just work with it, because it's obviously hanging around for a reason, I think. And that's curious too. Although, if it's unpleasant, it's not.
I think what this post illustrates to me is an autistic person takes a phrase, autistic and genuine clarifying questions about being interpreted as rude. Okay. They want to collect their thoughts about why in society they end up being called the rude one. And the autistic way is to really think around the problem. And so instead of a post that's a meme like we've just moved from, we've got here a pamphlet, a mini booklet. It's a 2-hour talk. It's the thing you put up on the screen, and then you move from one subject to another, and each one of these pieces is a paragraph and a presentation in itself. Some people will come to that post, and because all of those things are put together, the sum of the parts is more than the whole. It will spill from one thing, oh yeah, that happened to me and that happened to now I'm getting the penny's dropping because the different things all come together. So yeah, I see a good value in posts like this. It's very different from other posts, and people should communicate in the way people communicate.
The next post is from Nicola Vicky, owner of the PDA Space shop and works for the PDA Summit host and the PDA Space, and owner at the PDA Space. And what they've shared is something, as a quote. But the background information, they say, something I've been really sitting with recently is how much I value congruence. That what we say and what we do should align, especially when it comes to care, inclusion, safety and well-being. But I'm noticing more and more spaces, whether events, organisations or campaigns, saying one thing on the surface but not backing up in practice. For example, I recently attended a mental health event. I'll keep this vague to protect everyone's privacy, where incredibly sensitive topics were shared. Deeply personal and distressing experiences were spoken about. But there was no acknowledgement of the emotional impact this might have on the people listening. No support, not even a reminder to take care of yourself. I know I'm particularly tuned to how emotional safety and nervous system care can make or break an experience, but I left wondering, am I expecting too much, or is this something others notice too? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you notice this? Excuse me. Do you notice this disconnect between what's claimed and what's actually done? Does it land for you as it does for me? And the quote says, "Is it just me? I keep noticing spaces that claim to care about well-being, but don't seem to build it into their planning, into their delivery. Just hard follow-up. No check-ins, no emotional support, just hard topics without aftercare." What's people's thoughts on this particular quote and information?
Yeah, I can identify with this vulnerability issue in sort of spaces, especially online spaces where groups meet and discuss quite hardcore subjects at times. Well, it starts off kind of soft and it gets hard, and of course we're all concerned about practice, and there are a certain amount of rules, I suppose, conditions, but yeah, sometimes and with no real follow-up, no real support. I mean, sometimes you get one-to-one afterwards, when the event is over, perhaps. But I just wonder if these people sometimes know what they're taking on. But then again, who does?
I do recall years ago that somehow, maybe because I was very vocal, as I am now, that became this sort of go-to person for organisation and groups for someone to speak about their experience. And I'm not talking about the autistic experience, it's more about the mental health experience, about how, basically how, when I was talking about earlier about, what was going towards my diagnosis, what was the kind of mental health sort of experience of feeling stress, anxiety, depression, even suicidal thoughts. And obviously that sort of thing is very difficult to talk about. But I recall doing that in many instances. And, being asked to speak and actually feeling pretty good of doing so. But there was times where I felt I just said something, but there was no feedback. And sometimes it just felt like I was just pouring my heart out to strangers. And it didn't always feel beneficial, even though I felt it was all done for the right reasons and, the right intent.
I'm trying to control some anger. It really feels to me as though the norm out there amongst professional people who are training themselves to reach out to the autism community and the autistic people, the norm feels to me that they will break in, they will stir things around, and then they will leave people dumped with their aftermath of their smartness. And I've seen it happen, and I've seen the damage, but I'm also very aware that it's a wild west out there, and even autistically led situations can be damaging, and people can feel as though they get excluded very quickly from those two if they don't toe the line at vulnerable moments. And I've come across, I'm thinking of a very particular individual in my mind who spent a lot of time talking to me about this over the years, about the sense that autistic people can be the worst offenders in this, that they embrace people, take them in, and when a transgression of language or attitude or belief doesn't fit, that an individual gets excluded rather than dumped. So, yeah, as I say, I'm trying to contain anger when I think about this.
Thanks everybody for taking part tonight. That was a great discussion. Went through quite a lot of ups and downs, or just different emotions that we go through all the different topics that's been shared tonight. A special thanks to the people who share these posts that give us the topics to discuss, which is very much appreciated, and it does create and demonstrate how so many things can be talked about through the topic of autism and autistic life. So this is Harry's Facebook for Sunday the 18th of May 2025, which is part of Spectrum Voices Conversation, which is here 5:55 PM to 7:30 PM UK time, and on Facebook Live and YouTube Live and other platforms. And we're here every Sunday, and I look forward to doing the same next week. So thank you once again, and I'll hand over to Jules.
Thank you, Harry. That was an emotional experience, taking part and you sharing the things that you shared. Thank you very much for the work that you do for us there. Autistic Association supports Autistic Radio, and we open a meeting in the open to discuss what we do and how we do it.